something?
I think the wait is over.
Mm-hmm. Was that you, Mary, that asked that?
Yes.
Yes, please.
I just want to mention that I'm struck in this moment by how far ripples can go when we meet somebody and we have no idea where it's going to lead to. We're all gathering here, I'm gathering with you, I should say, directly as a result of meeting Carol Lawson back in 2016, 8 years ago, October 2016. And here we are. Now I'm going to meet all of you because I met that one person 8 years ago. I love these kinds of ripples. I love acknowledging sort of the power of a moment. We have no idea what's going to come from these things. I love that. And I thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you for sharing that, Mary. It's beautiful. Yeah. So let me just go ahead and welcome all of you. Thank you so much. I'm just so excited for our guest here today, Mary Reed. Um, she was suggested to me by Paul Hoyt, who was very, very excited. And I asked Paul and Carol for to give me some thoughts about who she was. And my gosh, they were just they. I thought, well, okay, all right, I'm going to definitely have to have Mary on if she's willing to do so. And she absolutely was. And we talked for quite some time. And I'm very, really thrilled to not spend a lot of time talking myself and just let Mary say what she has to say. She's just a fantastic. I'm not going to go any further than that. You'll find out in a moment. But welcome all to TLT, Thought Leader Thursday. I'm going to we'll just do a quick treatment, really, for just a short treatment. Is anyone's called to mood to do a treatment this morning? A prayer, opening prayer.
I would be happy to.
All right. Thank
Yeah.
you, Bill.
So let us let loose our attachment to things as they have been and open to something new. This timeline, this space line, this activity that we've been involved in up until now, it's just a story. And there's something new and wonderful happening. And right now, that newness, that happening is Thought Leader Thursday, the opportunity to dive in and learn something new, to be in the presence of this modern mystic, and to have the newness, the freshness, the insight, the wisdom unfold. I'm grateful for this time. I'm grateful for everyone here. I'm grateful for the wonderful way that the technology allows us to connect and deepen. So, with gratitude for this good, I know that this time is blessed, and I speak this word of blessing on behalf of each and everyone here. And so it is.
And so it is. And so it is. Thank you very much. I just want to remind everyone that we do encourage questions. And for you, Mary, we do encourage questions. I'm going to ask you just to go ahead and speak on what you want to speak to, but then people will be raising their hands. So we will just be asking whatever questions or whatever thoughts come to mind. We do allow them to ask questions as well. If that works for you, we hope that
Yeah,
it does.
absolutely.
Great. Okay. So let me just say, Mary Reed is a modern mystic, and she's here to discuss with us what she believes is humanity's awakening, which she discovered firsthand during her deeply moving metaphysical experiences. She's here to talk with us about what she discovered during her awakening and to guide us through the challenges and ultimate successes as we spiritually awaken to what we are here to do. So in December 2000, Mary Reed was staunchly agnostic healthcare executive who began having metaphysical experiences with the likes of Jesus, Buddha, and angels. And after more than a decade of struggling with the impact of these events, she finally surrendered her normal life and spent the next 7 years living in a tiny nunnery in the Himalayas, coming to terms with her profound abilities. Her extraordinary journey is detailed in her award-winning memoir, Unwitting Mystic, Evolution of the Message of Love. So I'm not going to speak much more on that. I have more to say, but she has so much more. I'm not going to talk more. Just to say that her latest book uh, is unfolded. It's called Humanity's Epic Awakening, which she will discuss with us today. So Mary, thank you so much for coming, and you just have the floor. And however you want to start and say, we are here to listen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Namaste,
Thank you, Paul.
namaste, everybody. Very nice to be here. I really appreciate the invitation. I just want to say, Reverend Sherry Johnson, I see your critter that you have with you, and hi to the. I always love when there's critter energy in the little windows that I can see. So thank you very much for the invitation. Paul Hoyt, bless you, and thank you for making this possible as well, and to all of you for being open to having me. I appreciate it. I hope that this is inspirational. All I can ever do is just share the truth of my experiences and trust that they will hit the truth in others and incite some remembrance and movement here. So let me just give a little bit of background. As PJ said, I used to be agnostic. I was not looking for this journey at all. It was the furthest thing from my idea of what my life was going to be. And in the summer of 2000, I started to hear a voice. And that voice said that I was supposed to be doing something very important, which I already thought I was. I was doing clinical research in respiratory medicine, mostly in AIDS, and I was working all over the world, just being normal. And this voice would not be denied. It just kept coming and coming and coming. And then there was just a series of events after 6 months of that voice that led me to seek some help. And I ended up in my very first metaphysical experience in December of 2000, going into the body and being of Jesus on the cross at the moment of crucifixion. And in this experience, suddenly I just had all of this understanding and information about the evolution of humanity, how we have evolved, all that led to that moment, all that happened as a result of that moment, and then how we evolved from that point forward to current day. So I saw humanity's evolution through the lens of Christ in that experience. And the next day I went into those realms again. I had a big meeting with Moses and my soul group on the conflict nature of our world, again, understanding things from that very high perspective and broad base of information. And then the floodgates were open, and I just started having these experiences more and more and more, which, as you might imagine, is profoundly confusing to go from those kinds of experiences and then back to your high-rise office in DC to do your normal work. So my world started getting really wonky, and the longer that these experiences went on, the more I kept failing to get help, to hold this, to understand what was happening. I kept seeing therapist after therapist and Reiki practitioners and shamans and allopathic doctors, and then back to the therapist, and nobody could help me understand what was happening, why is this happening, and most importantly, what do I do with this? What does one do with all of that really weighty, profound, broad base of information, especially because I don't have the language for it because I don't have a spiritual background. I don't have the community in which I can process these things. And I don't have any understanding of what all of this is, how to apply all of that to living as a human being or what to do with it. So that confusion continued on and on, really intense for 10 years. And in that 10th year, all of my normal life fell apart spectacularly. It was like the eggs all dropped and there was no way to put anything back together. And in that massive state of despair and inability to get help with what was happening with all of this mystical stuff, that ended in a suicide attempt in March of 2011. And inexplicably, 2 days after taking 97 prescription pain and sleeping pills with 3 glasses of wine, I just woke up. I just woke up on my own. I woke up extremely sick. I had no ability to control my physical movements, but I was alive. And it was only then, finally, in that supreme state of defeat, that I surrendered. I just quit in the biggest way possible. I stopped trying to figure it all out. I stopped trying to make a plan. I stopped trying to understand it. And I remember sitting on the edge of my couch and saying, you know, God, you can see I don't have any idea what I'm doing. Like, I have no idea what's happening here. So if there's something that you all need me to do, you're going to have to lead the way. I can't be the project manager for my life anymore. And I quit. And then all the doors just started flying open very, very easily within 6 months of that suicide attempt. After 10 years of profound confusion, I was invited to India to meet with a high Tibetan Lama to talk about my experience. And then I was invited to stay. I ended up living in that tiny little nunnery and finally having an opportunity to just stop all the attempts at being normal, everything, and just let everything begin to integrate. Begin to really come in and coalesce into a great understanding of the big picture, and then allow my own truth to settle in and sort of have my own self-acceptance journey of the truth of what's happening and who and what I am. So that's what set me on the mystical path. And my first book, Unwitting Mystic, is the story of that journey. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It really does speak in lots of different ways about the path of self-acceptance, even when that self is like really profoundly different, especially different than we think it is or expect it to be. My second book, Divine New Being, is a text of channeled teachings. After 20 years of big metaphysical embodied experiences, unexpectedly, 2 weeks into the pandemic in 2020, I began to channel a very large collective of divine beings. And so all of my teachings now are coming from that channeled state. So I'm just the vessel through which great understandings are happening. And I should mention that my channeling is of a very large collective, a stadium full of divine beings that call themselves consensus. So that's my second book. And then the third book, as PJ mentioned, is Humanity's Epic Awakening. And in this book, it was finally time for me to use my 23 years at that time of metaphysical experiences to show how my life journey is a representation of what's happening for all of us, in humanity's awakening. So I use about, I don't know, 35 or so of my embodied experiences. I just use the truth of the experiences themselves to show what I've experienced of where we've been in humanity's epic awakening, where we are now in the process, and what we're waking up into. So it's in 3 different sections. And I thought that the easiest way to convey this information, rather than doing a lot of talking about it, is simply to read a short chapter from each of these. They're literally like 1 or 2 pages each, to really give you a very simple view of how I experience these sorts of phases of humanity's evolution. Does that sound good?
Yeah, great.
All right,
Great.
good. Let's do it. I'm going to start with in the part 1 of this book, I give the whole context of where we've been, the paradigm that we've all been operating within in our conditioned ways of being. In my own experiences, these have all been rooted in a kind of denial of the divine, to use the language of Paul Selig. But in my own experiences, this came when we aligned to fear. Because when you think about it, fear does not know how to unite. Fear is a thing that recoils. And the moment that we encountered fear, we separated from our awareness of ourselves as part of Source, as part of God. So I'm going to read just one of the many experiences in the way that I experienced and understood that trajectory. So this is chapter 4. It's called Buddha's Enlightenment. The nature of our fear-based reality, in which we perceive ourselves as separate from Source, was reiterated in a wonderfully succinct way in my first encounter with Buddha. He helped deepen profound understandings with just one simple metaphor. I'm in a meditation when an image of Mata Amma, the Hindu hugging saint, comes into my awareness. I see her sweet smile and let the image float away. Shortly, an image of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama arises. I look at it only briefly, but that is enough. Immediately, I feel a swift pull into the Dalai Lama's mind. As soon as I am firmly there, I feel another swift pull through him, out of him, and into the 13th Dalai Lama's mind, then the 12th Dalai Lama, then the 11th Dalai Lama. Each time, it feels like a plop into and out of each mind. I continue on like this all the way through the line of Dalai Lamas, and when I reach the first, I feel a powerful leap out of his mind and into the mind of Buddha. I am here at the first moment he experiences what is traditionally thought of as enlightenment under the pipal tree. I see all that Buddha sees in the expanse of all that is. I become all the possibilities of existence and nothingness at once. I look at all that is, and I am all that is. I watch the interplay between all energies, noticing the flows and the snags and the entanglements. I see how the consciousness of emotions courses and at times alters directions and or stagnates. I embody all of this. It feels like bobbing in an ocean of everything without touching anything. It is all and only absolute love and equanimity in the exploration of experiences that are at times falsely warped in perception by the snags and the entanglements. In particular, in this flowing body of energies, I see what appears like a boulder made of fear, and I watch how people, which appear like individuated segments of energies, get caught on the boulder and can't get loose. Soon, more and more people are caught there, and it is as though an entire world is created in what feels like a stationary place within the great endless ocean of flowing energies. To those stuck on this boulder of fear, it does not feel like they are part of all that is flowing. From their vantage point, the flow is not happening with or through them. Everything is happening to them. So they remain stuck in fear, constantly striving to protect themselves from letting anything happen to them that would risk their survival. They have no idea that the only thing that has snagged them is their belief that fear is separate from all that is. I stay here with Buddha for a while, fascinated, absorbed, soaking it all in. We're not interpreting or assigning words to any part of the experience. We're just observing and understanding. The moment I have the thought that I understand everything, Buddha himself pops up in spirit form in front of me and looks at me with deeply content eyes. He has no form, but it's clearly him. He's expansive, as though taking up much of the cosmos. He smiles with a playful, piercing joy that makes me immediately cry in ecstatic happiness. Without using words, he says, "See, it's fun." So, as you can tell, experiences with Jesus and Buddha and Moses and God, I have very big experiences. And so many of these things go into the origins of what we perceive as very big, important moments or milestones or lenses through which we understand the human experience. So that's been the trajectory of all of my experiences. So that, again, is just a representation of the fear-based paradigm that we've been in throughout humanity's history. And in part 2, I talk about what's happening now, things that are indicating right now how we are waking up. And I'm going to talk about several of the components that we can see in these experiences through one single experience. Here again, I use many in part 2, but I'm just going to highlight one. This is chapter 16. It's called We Are Sue. Among the countless realizations I've had along this awakening journey, one in particular took me a very long time to understand because I had no frame of reference for it. We are not evolving out of separation consciousness on our own. We are doing this, must inherently do this, together. Our awakening has to happen in union with others because what we are evolving into is ever more realization of our oneness. What this means practically is that we begin to share and or expand our consciousness with others, not just in this earthly dimension, but across multiple dimensions. This is, in fact, what happens in all of my metaphysical experiences, and it is what happens in any spiritually transformative or near-death experience when someone encounters information in other realms or other beings. In these experiences, we expand our awareness and share consciousness beyond the confines of our separation reality. We're reaching this stage in awakening where we can experience God as us, zooming in and out to be aware in multiple ways. These experiences are occurring more and more throughout the world. Our abilities to connect to divine realms and wisdom are increasing not only in the frequency of occurrences, but in the diversity of occurrences. On our own path to divine union, we are beginning to encounter physical and non-physical beings alike that serve multidimensional purposes, and we do the same for them. We're becoming like open doors, literal portals, with and for each other in this earthly realm and across any number of dimensions, even when we or the other parties are unaware of what is happening. The first person with whom this happened for me was my friend Sue, several years before I started coming into my metaphysical abilities in any significant way. It began one afternoon when my then partner, Carrie, and I were at a cafeteria in a mall in Little Rock, Arkansas. We're making our way down the buffet line, facing the trays of food choices, when I'm suddenly overwhelmed with a knowing that Carrie is about to meet Sue, who had recently become my therapist. I turn and look around, but Sue is nowhere to be seen. I say to Carrie, "You're about to meet Sue." Carrie turns and looks around. "Where is she?" "I don't know," I say, "but it's about to happen." Carrie looks at me curiously, smiles with a shrug, then we continue moving down the buffet line. Several minutes later, Carrie and I are in the dining room of the cafeteria eating when I see Sue and her husband walk in and head to the restrooms in the far corner. I point her out to Carrie, and sure enough, on their way out, Sue and her husband stop at our table to say hello. They had been shopping in the mall and stopped by before heading home just to use the restroom. A few weeks later, I have an appointment at Sue's office, which is located in the back of her hilltop house. I park my car at the bottom of the hill, where a path leads up the woods to the back of the house. As soon as I turn off the car, in an instant, I am in the body of Sue. I am still me, but I am in the body of Sue and experiencing exactly what Sue is doing and feeling. She's working in a garden, hot and sweaty, and she's blissfully happy. My own body begins to sweat and fill with bliss. I can feel Sue's hands moving around in the dirt, and I can feel the grime of dirt and sweat on her skin. I sit in the car, wildly shocked, feeling sweaty and grimy and blissed out, trying to make sense of what is happening. After a few minutes, I manage to open the door and get out of the car, and as I walk up the path, the body consciousness sharing experience gradually fades away. Once at the back door, I ring the doorbell, but there is no answer. I ring again, no answer. As I turn to go around to the front of the house, Sue rounds the corner wearing gardening gloves. She's red-cheeked with sweat and positively gleaming with joy. "Oh, I'm sorry," she exclaims. She looks up at the sun and continues. "I was in the garden playing in this beautiful sunshine and lost all track of time." 6 years later, it was Sue whom I called to ask for help because strange mystical things had started happening to me. A week after that call, Sue was standing right beside me when the gates to my metaphysical abilities flung wide open. So it was Sue who facilitated that experience with the Christ crucifixion and the next day as well. So I have many stories like this in part 2 that are really indicative of this ability that we all have, that we are coming into, to share consciousness in different ways, to experience our oneness in many, many unexpected ways. Now, the last piece I just want to mention here is part 3. And part 3 is all about what we're waking up into, my own experiences about what I've experienced of where we're going. Now, the way that I explain that is a little, and I'm going to say a little bit about this, but I want to point this out, is a little like you can imagine if there is a new star that's born. The light of that star takes a while to reach our awareness, but that light already exists. It's just a while before it comes into our conscious awareness. So this is the same thing with our awakening. I'm on that sort of leading edge, experiencing what's coming. And much of what's coming is related to what's ending. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. All of the experiences that I talk about in the part 3 of this are all about the things that are ending. Now, this particular one is one of the most powerful for me, and it's always a joy to share this. This is chapter 26, The End of Hell. As mentioned previously, our awakening momentum is as much a creative process as it is a destructive one. Both of these aspects of transformation contribute to the confusion and mayhem inherent in large-scale change. While this confusion and mayhem will continue and even intensify for some as our fear-based consciousness doubles down on its efforts to survive, we will, in fact, soon begin to realize a reality far easier than we have ever known before. And that reality will be known in large part by all that is ending. Over the years, I've experienced many large-scale endings in ethereal, energetic realms that are making their way into the incarnate field of humanity. It is like I encounter stars whose bright lights are still a few years from arriving in our awareness, and when that light finally reaches all of us, we will realize that its glow will now always occupy places where darkness used to be. One of the most profound and emotional ending experiences I have had began when, in a meditation with my friend Karine, I suddenly entered a realm that would traditionally be considered hell. The feeling here is solely in alignment with the archetypal representation of the realm of hell. There is no pain, no fear, none of that. I'm simply to understand the presence of this realm. Before me are black-cloaked beings with their backs to me lined up on risers like a choir. They're all reaching out for something. There's a palpable feel of a healing potential present in this moment, and every being here is seeking something in anticipation. The beings begin to stomp their feet in revolt. They will no longer be patient. They demand the healing. This is their revolutionary moment. Shortly, a red-cloaked being, the classic archetype of the devil, appears in the back of the room holding a scepter. He walks up through a middle passageway dividing the risers, stops at the front of the room, then turns to face the black-cloaked beings with his scepter raised. After a moment, the devil slams the scepter down with a powerful thud and says, "The time has come." He closes his eyes and surrenders. Instantly, every single black-cloaked being in the risers melts and disappears. I feel a massive swell of relief rise up within all of humanity, and I become overwhelmed, heaving tears. Through my tears, I see what happens next and utter, "Oh my God." I watch in shock as the color drains. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional here. The energy of these things remain with me. They are so powerful. I watch in shock as the color begins to drain from the devil's red cloak and from the devil himself. His entire being shifts into a blend of luxurious colors that get brighter and lighter, until finally everything is exquisite, transparent light. And now, where the archetype of the devil once stood, there's only the presence of God.
Mm.
I look around me, and the entire space has changed. The risers are gone. Man, I feel very emotional with this. The risers are gone, and there's simply a vast, empty room. It is not as though the risers are the black-cloaked characters or the devil will be replaced by something else. The entire space becomes an abandoned space that is no longer needed. The realm of hell is no longer needed. The very idea of hell is no longer needed. I'm filled with deep emotion as the experience ends because I'm fully embodied with what is in store for humanity, which is the same thing I'm feeling now. Afterwards, still in tears, I say to my friend Corrine, it's a shame that I can't share with the world the feeling of dissolving the realm of hell, or the experience of witnessing the disillusion of the devil to reveal God. The world would heal in an instant. All the ancient beliefs tethered to the idea or philosophy of hell would dissolve in an instant. Boy, so you can see the scale of these things that we're coming into are profound, in that I talk about the end of separation, the end of ancient elders, the end of opposing sides, the end of all manner of things that have held us in this dualistic way of being, in the paradigm of suffering that we have in our belief that we're separate from our source. So I also just want to mention, on the heels of this book now, I have a new book that's coming. It will be published hopefully in the next month. And that book is entirely to be a resource, a tool to help those that are awakening, a resource for support, because so many people, I speak from a lot of experience. I've worked not only my own journey, but I've worked with more than 1,000 people around the world who are in varying stages of awakening. And it can be profoundly confusing. It can be destabilizing. It can be really a challenge, a very challenging journey. And not only for the individuals that are awakening, but for the practitioners that are supporting or serving them, and the spiritual leaders who are trying to shepherd everyone along, shepherd our awakening world along, because the leaders themselves are also awakening. Once again, we're all doing this together. We're all in these varying stages. So my next book is going to be addressing that. And this awakening, part of the reason why I include in that book information for practitioners and spiritual leaders, and even for media who are interviewing people like me, the reason I'm including these people is because for spiritual organizations or spiritual leaders in particular, spiritual practitioners, the awakening is actually leading people out of spiritual centers, the old traditional models, but it's also leading some people into them. So it's different. We're transitioning our audiences, who's sitting in the pews, who's in these community circles. And some of the new community models are evolving through individuals like me. I have a private community that I gather with every week. And so community models are changing. Spiritual leaders are changing, and organizations need to catch up to that. The umbrella organizations that support individual organizations, and the leaders and boards of directors and the practitioners within them all need to kind of catch up. But the question is, what does that new model look like? So everybody's kind of fumbling their way through this transition, and my new book will be specifically a resource for support for that. Now, I just want to mention one important piece of the guidance for practitioners and spiritual leaders that are the ones trying to shepherd folks through this grand epic awakening. And that is recognition that the whole tone of spirituality needs to change. Historically, I speak very directly about this. Historically, as you all know, theology in particular has been really weighted in heavy stuff, in death, in morality, in overcoming, and conquering, and suffering. And a lot of our spiritual community has been centered in that tone, unbeknownst to everybody. And it just keeps us focused, keeps us centered in kind of that heaviness. And speaking from a lot of experience with direct metaphysical wisdom, it is not so damn serious up there. There is so much divine, joyous nature that we miss out on by being focused constantly in serious, heavy, weighty things. And so we are called in our awakening, and in the people and the models that are shepherding us through the awakening, to have a lot more fun, to really feel that innate, divine, joyous, kind of ornery, playful self as the one conveying the information, that it's embedded in the tone of everything that we're talking about, everything that we're sharing, everything that we're bringing to the table. And I refer to this as big, jolly love. That big, jolly love is innate within all of us in the divine spirit. I assure you, I assure you that in those divine realms, the angels and the masters are not walking around solemnly bowing to each other and saying namaste in such serious tones. They're like high-fiving each other like they're at the bar. Like it's a joyous, hey, I see you, I know you, I honor you, nice to see you. A joyous, divine greeting. And this is something that we need to begin infusing in the very mindset of how we approach spirituality, spiritual teachings, spiritual shepherding, and service. So I just want to make sure that I bring that out as one of the important things. I'll talk much more about that in my next book. I think that's probably a good place to stop maybe and allow some questions. I've done a lot of talking here, but I tried to lay as much of a broad foundation here for understanding of my own experiences and what I have to offer in terms of perspectives.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. You absolutely have. And so don't be shy if anyone has any questions and things like that. Oh, okay, so Dr. Laura, she has a question or a comment.
I'm super excited. So I want to understand better. You said let me lower my hand. In the very beginning that and I have two questions too. How you either got into or went into the Jesus experience and then the Moses, and you said Sue facilitated this experience. I mean, did it just pop into your head, or were you in a meditation? How did that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate you saying that because it helps me to be able to note that there's no one way to enter into these direct experiences. And for me, they happen in lots and lots of different ways. That first one was actually in hypnosis. Sue just helped me relax enough because remember, I'm a big executive doing global work in respiratory medicine. I have no interest in quieting my very busy mind. And so she helped me really just get quiet enough to allow everything to pop up. And so it was through a hypnosis session, actually through two back to back. And each of those sessions, by the way, went on for more than 3.5 hours. So they were really, really deep. But that's what opened the floodgates. Then when I came back, I saw her in Arkansas. When I came back to my home, I began to have these things spontaneously. And so they would happen like coming into or out of sleep, when I would just sort of sit quietly as I'm doing the dishes, like lots and lots of just random moments. For me now, they often happen in a meditative experience. That's where most of them, because I'm kind of available to things more overtly in that. But you know, people talk to me all the time about they read something and suddenly they're in an experience, or they're listening to a meditation or one of my satsangs and suddenly they're just in this other realm or whatever. So there's no set formula or strategy for them, although a lot of people do have certain things that work for them ritualistically. But for me, there's really no predicting per se. Okay.
Awesome. And my second question is, a goal of mine for 2024 is surrender. And so you talked about, you after your suicidal experience, you went complete surrender and you got invited to stay at the nunnery. So I have a 14-year-old kid. I got to take to high school and do laundry and all those types of things. So opt for me to go to nunnery is null. But what would be and I'm starting a new profession, right? I was an interpreter and now become a professional speaker and trying to figure out what to do. So what would you suggest for me to surrender to make it more flow into?
Yeah, that's a
I'm
great
getting
question.
told different things.
Yeah,
So I don't know where to go.
the key to this is really just developing a capacity within you to relax and open up to deeper guidance. And so that level of surrender, that kind of surrender, that conditioned way of surrender happens in a very easy kind of, if you imagine just sitting for a moment, taking a few breaths, the traditional way of letting your body kind of relax, everything getting quiet for a moment, and you imagine that there's like, you can just imagine a gently flowing river that you just walk out into, turn over on your back, and just float. And you're just being carried on that current. When you do that, energetically speaking, what happens is there's information inside of you about how to let go, how to just for a moment surrender into the greater flow, let yourself be carried. And when that happens, everything is sort of out of the way for a little bit. And then really easy realizations about new perspectives or new things that are new ways to do things or new opportunities. In other words, we create an availability in us to a path of ease. This is the most simple technique that I have, is really just allowing yourself that total release and surrender, and inherent in that is trust. And what we're doing is just teaching our energetic field what it feels like to be in an open state of surrender. And because we are in that state, we're being met by that surrendered energy, everything that's available then to us. We become available to what's available to us. And that's in that higher energy that's accessible once we've cleared all the obstacles to it. And while we're in our thinking mind, while we're in our analytical, busy, efforting mind, it's like pushing on a door that's saying pull. Right? It's an effort. We're exerting a force of thought energy, when what we're really seeking is an ease of inspiration, an ease of connection, an ease of new realizations that can come in. So the moment we have, even if it's just for a minute, we open that capacity. We begin to train our energetic field in a state of remembrance of how to let go, let go, let go. So we're not always in that efforting stage. Make sense?
Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's
Thank you,
my
Mary.
pleasure. I
Reverend
also
Paul.
saw that I just created fireworks or something. I don't know how I did it, but I love that.
It was cool. Hi, Mary.
Hi,
Couple of
Paul.
questions for you. One, did you ever ask or get an answer to, and I don't know if you ever asked, why me?
I think that was probably the most chronic question I had. And it usually came with the word fuck. So why the fuck is it me? Like, why, it wasn't a polite ask usually. It was in my, those years of confusion and whatever. And, I never really got a specific answer to it. It was all just revealed in time when I said that I finally had that ability to stop all the mental machinations and the efforting and just allow everything to come in and coalesce. Then it all made sense. Then the answers to that kind of thing were clear. And it was also like, well, of course. Well, of course. Now I understand my whole life. I understand why I had to go through that kind of family journey or that kind of adolescent journey or that kind of professional journey and all the things that it led to in my own capacity and understanding now. So that's it.
Thanks. One
You're
more.
very-
What is your daily life like now? I mean, with all of this insight and all that you've been through, just what is your daily life like?
Well, I wake up and the moment that I'm aware that I'm awake, I just open everything up. I quiet the mind. I just open everything up to be. That's it, to simply be the day, to be in and as all that's underway, to be available to everything that's available to me, so that I'm not directing anything. I'm just in the available state, in the unitive state. So I begin there, and then I have some coffee and I return some email. I do consultations almost every day. I do 1 or 2 consultations. My consultations are a couple of hours long. So they're kind of intense personal engagements with people. I write, I do things like this. Yesterday was an interview, this very same kind of thing. So I have those kinds of engagements, and then I work on projects like courses or books that can be of more support. So it's generally just a day of being led in how I can be most helpful given my experiences given all that's flowing through me, how can I be most helpful? And then just follow wherever that leads. I don't plan very long in advance. I just made an announcement that I'll be doing some workshops and satsangs in the Bahamas in October. I do believe that's the longest I've ever planned in advance. I don't usually plan very far in advance, but that door just flew open. And I'll tell you a little bit of synchronistic joy that came through that. I just returned from Edinburgh, Scotland. It was my birthday and I went to play. And I was at the airport. And as I was sitting at the airport, across from me in the terminal across was balloons and all kinds of decorations with palm trees and all this sort of stuff. And it was a flight going to the Bahamas. And I'm like, oh, that looks like fun. That looks like fun. And while I'm sitting there looking at that, I opened my email and there was an invitation to do retreats in the Bahamas. And I'm like, well, I suppose I should say yes to that. So that's how I follow my leads. Those are what my day looks like.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, Paul.
Andrea.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon.
Good morning.
I was curious if you could speak a little bit more about this idea of the changing of traditional church services and the organizational structure. We all are aware of a lot of churches closing, for example, and there's also at the same time this awakening and this idea that people want to have more connection, and in community we can have I think sometimes a stronger connection, or at least like-minded people, and to share the experiences with. And so I was curious if you could just speak to a little bit more about that changing structure. And
yeah, I'm very glad you asked that question because I think it's very important to understand this. First, let me say that I've been in a lot of different spiritual centers and churches. When I lived in India, after I released my first book in 2014, so now 10 years ago, I would leave the nunnery during monsoon season, which is in the summer, and I would go on tour. So I would speak at lots of different spiritual centers, which is how I know Carol. She invited me to speak at the Center for Conscious Living. And so I saw a lot of the struggles that was happening in these centers. I would speak to a lot of the spiritual directors. I would speak to boards of directors. I would speak to people in the congregations. And I could see very clearly, and I talk about this in my next book, I could see very clearly which leaders were awakening themselves and not feeling like they could bring their whole truth to the pulpit or even into the boardrooms to talk with the other spiritual leaders. And so there was some confusion about how to lead while you're awakening and being true to yourself, but also being true to what's been done in the center. So I heard a lot of frustrations from leadership. I also watched a lot of the boards of directors, the sort of governance of these centers, and the umbrella organizations to which they belong actually limit the potential for change within those organizations because they had their old ideas, the old rules, and those were for the old model. They were not malleable to allow for change, the kind of change that's happening now. The kind of change that's happening now requires a different level of truth telling. It requires the leaders themselves to speak the truths about their confusion, about their awakening events, experiences, about the people that are coming to them from the congregation. I mentioned earlier that this awakening is driving a lot of people to centers, and the people who are leaving, if people are having any kind of exit conversations, to understand what the truth is of these people, and then allowing that truth to be what guides the way forward. As it is, we kind of leave the truth hidden. We kind of leave those difficult or awkward, confusing conversations to the side or on the sidebar, and they need to be front and center. There's great guidance within that truth. There's great realization and understanding and compassion and an energy that's leading us into ever greater perspectives. And we need those ever greater perspectives to be at the table. We also need those people who are leaving, those people who are arriving to be at the same table. So we used to have a very hierarchical model where it's a board of directors and the spiritual leaders behind closed doors deciding how things will go, and then they take it out to the congregation. And that cannot be the way anymore. That is not oneness. That is an old hierarchical model. That is a way of separation. We know what you need and we're going to bring it to you. And those voices, all the voices need to be around the table now. So we literally need to change the models of leadership to be more inclusive of the voices that are speaking their truth from divine experiences. So for example, if I were to come into a spiritual center, I would really want the leadership to understand where I'm coming from. You see? So we need to have permission for the leaders to speak their truth. And when I say the spiritual leaders, I mean the ministers, I mean the boards of directors, not just to tell each other, but to tell the umbrella organizations that they need to get on board with bigger changes systematically that allow greater flexibility and greater truth, greater divine truth to come in. There's been an old reliance on old teachings, old theology, old expectations just wrapped around those teachings. And there's all new teachings, all new perspectives coming to the fore, just as I said about big, jolly love. You see, these things change the whole tone. They open up different possibilities in ways that we haven't imagined before. And that's the key. We have to imagine something different. And we've only been able to imagine different versions of what we've already experienced. But what we're coming into is going to be all new. And so we need to have all voices that can lend to those possibilities at the table. Does that help? Yeah, good, good, good.
Thank
That's
you,
a
Mary.
great question. I really appreciate you asking that.
Yeah. Patricia.
Mary, thank you so much. I love your profound story, and I love how articulate you are in explaining all of those mystical experiences that you've had. And I was wondering if you could share in detail about that first experience you had with the Christ in a state of Christ consciousness. What were you feeling? What was it like? Is that in one of your books, or what?
Yes,
What did you?
it's in both books because I use them in kind of different contexts. The more sort of raw version is the first book because it's only 3 years out from the actual experience when I finally went public with it, when I came out of the closet with that story. But just in general, first of all, anything that I say is going to diminish the actual experience. Any word that I begin to ascribe to it is going to diminish the actual embodied richness and depth and profundity and vastness of it. There's no way to really succinctly or concisely capture that. But I will tell you that it was obviously profound. And when I realized that I'm not only in the body of Jesus and seeing everything through the Christ lens, but I'm also in that same exact experience. There's a moment where I literally have the death experience of Jesus. I feel the death, and then I feel my spirit as Jesus pull up out of the body and then hover above the crowd in the exact same way people do in a near-death experience. And now, as I do this, I begin to experience the emotions of every single person present. I can see who's angry, who's filled with rage, who's filled with grief, who's all of this kind of stuff. And I watch how it's all connected to the threads that we're all carrying in our hearts. I see all of it with unfathomable scale and clarity. Now, at the same time, I'm also watching. Before that death experience, I watched how we had evolved, and I got all of the information in an instant. Things that I would have never, ever, ever been able to understand. I understood in an instant about all that led up to it. And I remember distinctly being surprised in the experience that what led to that moment wasn't what my grandmother told me. That this wasn't about betrayal by a disciple or some people in power who felt threatened by Jesus. Instead, what caused that moment in my experience was the momentum of a mindset. It was the momentum of a fear and conflict ideology that had taken ages to cultivate and perpetuate and deeply entrench. And I watched all of that momentum come to a head in the crucifixion and then continue on in different ways. So the scale of everything that I was experiencing was literally mind-boggling, but it was also so simple. It was also extraordinarily simple. And this is the way of all divine wisdom. When it comes right down to it, it's really very simple. We like to complicate things in our human mind, but it was very simple. Here's what caused all of this. Here's how it continued. And here's what that mindset looks like today. We continue on in a conquering mindset. I watched in that moment that all of mankind had kind of made a decision in that moment that they didn't want a good Christ that healed. They wanted a good Christ that conquered. And that's what set the tone for much of the way that the extrapolation of Christianity went out, and then other religions as well, and patriarchy and all the other kinds of things that are wrapped up in it. So you can see there was a whole lot of information that happened that was just so far beyond any kind of mental idea even of what happened or what was going on. So it was absolutely stunning to embody. And it was a huge, massive jolt to my whole being. It's like everything in me just went, and there's no way then for everything to settle back into its same old way. I was forever changed in that moment. And that's how every single one of my experiences happen. That's what happens every single time. And every single time that I come back, I'm a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. I can have more perspectives and more perspectives and more perspectives. I hope
Thank you, Mary.
You're very welcome.
All right, Scopy. I don't know if I said your name right. I'm sorry if I didn't.
You did. My question is about your suicide attempt. At the time, what did you think would happen to you? And how is that different now?
Well, what I hoped would happen to me is that all my suffering would end, that everything would just be finished, and that maybe what had been like my idea during that time, and you have to understand, I was so lonely. It makes me emotional just to think about it now, which is another reason why I've written this next book, is that I was so lonely without the resources or the understanding about what was happening to me, that it was just devastating to not be able to talk about it, to not be able to be met anywhere. And I want to make sure that people now that are starting to have more and more of these experiences don't have that same process. So in my despair, in my loneliness, I thought maybe all of this is a sign that I'm supposed to do my big work from the other side.
Mm.
That maybe I'm just going upstream here, fighting all of this stuff. And what this is really telling me is that I need to leave. Now, I need to be clear, that's not what I was told. That's what my mind created as a story to justify all of my despair and why my normal life fell apart. It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm not supposed to be in this life anymore, I guess. And so I thought that all the suffering would end, and then I would have all of the information from the other side and be able to do my stuff. And that's obviously not what happened. Now I'm aware that for me, that experience was just about needing to have total, authentic surrender, to stop having any kind of idea of controlling my own life or destiny, and really just allow what I'm here to do to unfold. And I really have a greater ability, or not greater ability, a greater compassion for the struggle that people have in surrendering, but also the necessity for it, especially people that are really going through a lot of people call it the dark night of the soul or whatever. Surrender can be extraordinarily scary in that.
Let me just interrupt really quickly. We've got like about 60 seconds before we're going to be cut off from the recording and stuff. So just so you know, we're almost up to it.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
That should be it. I have greater understanding and compassion for it. There you go.
Thank you, Mary. I'm sorry. This has been so much, and we just go on and on for hours on this. Beautifully, beautifully done. Thank you for being here with us. Hope all you got your questions answered, and you know how to get Mary's website and to get some of her books and things like that. Thank you all so much for being here, Mary.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. It's a joy.
Yeah. Please. Okay. Please show up next month for Sean Harkin. If he's not read her book already, Susceptible to Light. Oh my God, it's just amazing. Do not miss that. Thank you so much for sharing Charlene with us, Mary. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you
One
next
more
month.
comment. There's a workshop coming up on Saturday, May 11th. It's on life visioning with Reverend Dr. Robert Brzezinski. That's on the website. You are invited. And if you are not registered for the Boundless Retreat at Unity Village in the fall, that's on the website too. Sign up today.
Today, check out the website. Lots going on. Thank
Much
you all.
love.
Bye, everyone.